And I will take the lead from Councillor Terry O'Neill, who wishes everyone a belated Mother's Day, actually every mother a belated Mother's Day, and I welcome you all to Council and Committee. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. First item are minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, May 7th, 2012. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm wondering to the clerk and also to the mayor, why can't we deal with these 4 items in tonight's meeting? Why are we having this 2 o'clock meeting? We backed up with a lot of in-camera meetings that we never seem to complete. This would have been prime time to put these 4 items on tonight's meeting and complete all our executive items. For no love or money, can somebody explain to me why these 4 items are here this afternoon?
This is the committee structure that Council approved at the beginning of the year, and these items coming forward are information items with staff presentations, and that was the structure that Council approved late in December last year.
But that's a pretty weak reason why it can't be done in the evening meeting. I mean, I can't see no reason why.
The weak reason is that Council told staff to put it on the afternoon meetings.
But I don't know. But you know what? I think if you took a vote from Council, if we could refer all these items to tonight's meeting, I think that it would be almost unanimous to deal with it, so we can get through with our executive items. We've had in executive items, we have had deferral for 3-4 weeks, or 5 or 6 meetings.
Councillor Sikora, you're speaking about the agenda of an in-camera meeting.
No, Mayor, don't take me on, please, because I'm not speaking about the items on the executive meeting. I'm not talking about items.
Councillor Sikora, you took an oath. You can breach it if you want.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I took an oath. That's right. Did I mention any item in camera? You know what? You have a hoof and mouth disease. You seem to want to run off at the mouth all the time. I just asked a plain question. Yeah. Why can't these items be dealt with tonight? Very simple. And let's get on with the agenda and closed door meeting.
Fair enough. Thank you for the question. Madam Clerk.
There's another second.
Councillor Nicholson.
Your Worship, I just wanted to say staff are here. Some of the public have attended because they've seen the published agenda, and obviously we need to continue. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
That's the only reason, I guess.
Well, rising in staff's defense, staff are doing what Council asked them to do. If Council asks them to do something else, we'll have to tell them we asked them. Madam Clerk.
The first item of business are the minutes of the meeting held May 7th, and the recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to the 2011 Bear Aware Annual Report and 2012 Bear Season Update. We do have a presentation by the Acting Manager of Environmental Services.
Please speak to us about controlling bears.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have prepared the annual Bear Aware report for your information, and it summarizes the activities and events of the 2011 program. The Bear Aware program has been operating in Coquitlam for the past 8 years, and it's focused on reducing the conflicts between people and bears within Coquitlam. To reduce these conflicts, there continues to be a great deal of focus on education and the reduction of food attractants such as food waste and household garbage. Last year, Coquitlam Council decided to broaden this program to include other types of urban wildlife issues, and they created the new Urban Wildlife Program. Mr. Drake Stevens has been the Bear Aware Coordinator for Coquitlam since 2005, and last fall he was the successful candidate and was appointed as Coquitlam's Urban Wildlife Coordinator. Drake has prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to accompany the information report before you, and I would now like to ask Drake to give his presentation.
I have a question.
Councillor Reid has a question first.
Just before you sit down, when we're putting bear information out, are we putting it out in several different languages that I know we do some of our information? Can anyone answer that?
Yes, we do have some letters.
Oh, you can answer it.
We have some letters transferred into different languages. When we realize we have a language barrier at the door, we give them a letter in Korean or Cantonese or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much. Not in my
Mr.
neighborhood.
Stevens.
Sorry. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm Drake Stevens, the Urban Wildlife Coordinator for the City of Coquitlam, and I just have a short PowerPoint, bit of a review of what we've been doing. The program has seemed to be becoming more popular in the surrounding communities. Mission, Maple Ridge, and Anmore now have bear aware programs. A lot of what we do is focus on the education and trying to reach out to many levels of the community, presentations in schools and ESL classes, community events, seniors groups. Last week I even did one for the RCMP, dispatchers, and today, in the last few days even, we've been out knocking on 80 doors and doing a nighttime garbage audit. Lots of ESL classes, summer camps throughout the summer, Girl Guides and Boy Scouts. But for the past 7 years, we've been pretty bear-centric, just focusing on bears, and I've realized as this has been going along that I've been getting complaints about rats and skunks and various nocturnal animals coming into neighborhoods, and it's almost the same addresses that I've been to about bear complaints. So it really is an attractant issue, not just, we're not talking about bears, we're talking about attractants for the most part. There has been an increase in bobcat sightings this last 2 years. I thought that was kind of interesting, so thus the picture of the bobcat. And we're going to continue again this year with cooperating with Port Moody and Port Coquitlam on these ads in the local papers and as much communication. We've had a lot of success with the local newspapers getting out to a lot of households in the last couple of years. We're continuing to still offer bear-resistant bins to the public. And this is a map of the sightings last year. This isn't all the sightings, but that's only about half of the sightings, but it shows you how widespread it is around there's hardly an area of Coquitlam that hasn't seen a bear last year. And bears getting into garbage seems to be the big priority for us to focus on. If attractants weren't this available, we'd have less problems with other issues like rodents and raccoons and coyotes. And that's pretty much the end of my PowerPoint.
Okay, you ended with a very cute photo, though. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for all the hard work that you do to educate people around this issue. Just a quick question. I didn't see anything in my notes that made reference to, for instance, presentations to our residents' associations. Because sometimes they can collect a large group of people and sometimes they have a large number of people on their email lists. And I'm wondering if that would be somewhat helpful to do presentations in that manner where you get a large group together instead of just a few people.
We did one for the Northeast Ratepayers Association this year. We have done the Westwood Plateau Community Association in the past. I go to any that will invite me. You know, if I'm called, we go there. And
right.
We're not, some of the presentations we have been doing are to fairly large groups and not just, 20 or 30.
Right, right. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. So I've got two questions. One has to do with the garbage-proof bins. And I know that, the bear-proof bins, they're not garbage, they're only garbage-proof because I can't ever do the hook on it, so I can't put garbage in. The challenge that I know that some residents have had and that I've had is that we're now putting our compostables in with our yard waste. And if you don't have a lot of yard waste and you only have a couple of little bags, it feels silly to put it in that big bin. And I don't know how the garbage disposal folks do they lift the bin? I mean, I thought, if I recall, you used to have to put a liner in so that they could lift something out, but now we can't put plastics with our food waste. So I think it's become a little bit of a challenge to use the bear-resistant bins. So I have a solution. I was to put a big box inside so that it's just, you open it up and grab it. And has anybody else complained about it?
No, we have been asking people to do that to make it easier. Some of the guys are picking them up, but WorkSafe doesn't want to have them lifting that weight of a bin when it's full.
So putting in a big box inside it upside down and just raising it up, that works. Okay, I didn't know that, and I was talking to somebody over the weekend. We were trying to brainstorm how to make use of these bins better. So that's just one question. And the other has to do with construction sites. And I know that in the Northeast we've been particularly challenged with workers up there not understanding and appreciating the challenges we have had. And I'm wondering if you could tell us what kinds of things we've done in terms of getting them to follow the program, and if you think that's working, and if it's not working, maybe we should, as a council, come down a little heavier with, you get one warning and then we shut down your site or something like that. So if you could just fill us in a little bit about what you've been doing with construction sites.
We've been working with almost all the construction companies up there, but it's the small time, they're building one house, they might have a guy in for a few days doing one specific job, but the big companies have built it right into their monthly and their weekly safety talks to their workers. They're penalizing their own workers, fining them. They've provided bear-resistant bins at one of the Morningstar site. They've had me in to do presentations to all the workers on the big sites, and they are getting much, much better. But it's still that small ma and pa operation that's hard to police. So
because, and it's not fair if many of them are adhering to our requests for having clean sites. I wonder if it almost would make sense if they as a group would find a way to just hire somebody to clean up their sites at the end of the day. Just, hire a couple of kids and have them go in and just clean up the garbage. It reflects poorly on all of them, unfortunately. When we say the construction workers, they all get painted, even the good guys. Well, thank you. I do want to hear more, perhaps in a couple of months, about what's happening with the construction sites and if they're continuing to improve their tidiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much, Drake, for your presentation. I note that we had 900 calls in 2011, so we've averaged below that and above that, but this is a little bit higher mark, I would say, in the last couple of years of calls that we've had. And I noticed there was 90 warning letters and 193 notice violations. Are we getting good compliance? Are we still, like you mentioned earlier, that we know addresses, we're still having the same problems? Are we still having the same problems with similar addresses in their garbage put out the attractions?
It's almost always a new address. Once a person's had the second warning and they realize the fine is $500, you get compliance. It's very rare for someone to push it to the limit.
It's unfortunate it takes a second warning to get people to comply on this one. That's unfortunate. And I guess from my look at this, and I'm out in the city quite a bit, is that it seems to me that on the west side of Coquitlam, from, I'd say, at least Mariner going west, a lot of people are still putting their garbage out at nighttime thinking we don't have bears in our neighborhood. And you look at the map, they're there. And so there seems to be a disconnect on that part of the community about getting on board about putting their garbage out in the morning. How are you dealing with that?
The bears seem to have noticed that too. They moved from the Westwood Plateau to the Monday Park area, and that's where all the bears were getting killed 2 years ago. 7 bears were destroyed along the Como Lake corridor. The city sent out, I think it was, we mapped out an area where we thought the problem was the most. 60% of the people there had their garbage out the night before, compared to maybe 5% on the Westwood Plateau. So compliance was the problem there. So we sent out close to over 2,000 warning letters to that area. And then it was down to only 40 people. But over the course of the winter, people get lazy again. They don't see a bear, and you pretty well end up having to go back in again, and the warnings were a year or two old now.
'Cause it's a problem. I see it on that side of the town, especially if people just don't think there's bears. It's a real hard intake in that area, and I think maybe you're going to have to start stepping with fines, something in that area to get people, because I notice it when I'm through that area quite a bit, that there's a lot of garbage set out like the night before, and it's sitting there, and it's, as I think the saying has been made many times, the garbage bear is a dead bear, and we don't want that in this community, in that area. The one thing I do for my green waste can is we use the brown paper bag, put it in there, they take that works great out of the can every time on the green waste. That's a program we still got to get better compliance and build that up too. Thank you, Drake.
Thank you very much. There seems to be a lot more bears along the residential area. Is that, pardon me, because of the bear population has grown in the last few years, or is it because the development is climbing up further into where they used to be?
Whatever the reason it is the same all over North America. The bear population has doubled in the last 50 years, and it's because they're intelligent and adaptable, and they're taking advantage of us, having fruit trees and garbage, and they're having more cubs. So yes, there are more bears, and it's right down New York, Florida, New Jersey, places that didn't even see bears in the last 50 years now have a bear problem. Burnaby is starting to see bears again.
And are you finding that the people really, with the type of garbage cans that they put out, does that attract a lot more bears?
Garbage is most part of it. 80% of the complaints about bears being in the yard, there's usually garbage involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen brought up something that I think is really important. I would like to know perhaps if we could not work with Drake and with bylaws, and in the next couple of weeks have a bylaw enforcement officer on some extra duty going out about 10 at night for a couple of hours in different areas and looking to see these folks that have their garbage out. And let's just find them. Let's not. I think we've been giving notices about this for 2 years, 3 years, and I think we should just stop with the notices and just start with the fines, because this is costing all the taxpayers in this city a lot of money. We do a lot of advertising. We have salaries to pay, not even to mention the emergency services that might be required if somebody does get injured by a bear, which we've had happen. So I don't know if that would help you or not, but I think we really need to start putting bylaw officers out at night and just nailing these people, and that's where I would be, and I thank you for this. I did want to ask you something about, I know, the reason I was bringing up the multilingual things, maybe we need to be doing more, not just the letters, but maybe some more newspaper advertising or something, because I noticed there's quite a few neighbors on my street, and we definitely have bears coming out of the Scott Creek right in beside our development and coming in, and they're taking pictures on their deck 6 feet away. And you just go back, and I'm going, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, So it would be better to, maybe we need to get some more of that information out in the newspapers as well. Because, although they're gorgeous, and I'd love to have one of those little cubs and cuddle it to death, I realize I'd be the one that would be gone, not the cub. So I think maybe we're at a crucial time right now that maybe we could make some real headway if we get some bylaw officers out at night and start finding those with garbage out to start with. And then we have to worry about the fruit trees and all the rest of it, I guess, right? And the bird feeders are the big ones in our complex. They're not allowed, but people still feed the birds, and along come the bears. Is that right? I don't know what bird seed could interest bears for.
The sunflower seeds have a high oil content in that, but the seeds are also causing a rodent problem. So it's the same people that are attracting bears and
are bringing
in everything else at night, all the nocturnal animals, the skunks and raccoons. And
yeah, we have raccoons, yeah. Okay, thank you, Drake. So I would like to talk about that, Your Worship, with bylaws.
Yep. Well, thank you. I too thank you for your presentation, Drake. And I'm flipping over to page 5 of your report. There's the bear sighting map for last bear season. And I'm troubled by a couple of elements, and the significant element that I see is that for some reason there seems to be a higher concentration of bear sightings. Mind you, we're a strange-shaped municipality, but not far from our borders. And I'm trying to understand, I mean, how many of these bears know not to go into Port Moody or Port Coquitlam? How many of them stay in Coquitlam?
They're definitely moving back and forth into Port Moody and Port Coquitlam.
So it seems to me that the better public policy objectives could be achieved with a map that showed bear sightings in both of those communities as well, and we could perhaps coordinate. How much do we coordinate now with the neighboring communities?
It should be improving, but I get too many reports every week. Like I go through 40, 50 reports every Monday from the Conservation Service on these sightings, but I don't get any of the Port Coquitlam ones. And there's nobody in Port Coquitlam mapping them. But there's supposed to be a new system coming up where provincially they will be mapped, and if they share that with us, it'll be improved. But the other things, Maple Ridge is now doing the Bear Aware program, and Anmore, and Port Moody sort of takes care of their own in-house. They do work with us.
Now, there are large areas of Coquitlam, and it even shows here that still there are large areas of Coquitlam that have a very low likelihood of seeing a bear next year, or this coming year, based on last year. How do we convince those residents that they should go to great lengths to keep that up, to maintain that? Clearly, we've seen particularly along the ravines, bears being drawn further and further, largely because of garbage. And that's because residents have never seen a bear, so they keep putting their garbage out at night. And I see it in my neighborhood, I see it in other neighborhoods. How do we convince them that that's changing?
Well, the fines are one way, but education, not just about, people don't believe they're going to see a bear, so they're still being careless. But with enough education, I'm hoping people will realize they may have a rat problem or a mouse problem or coyotes, or these things are going to cause property damage and get into their homes. And it's good attractant management that's going to keep for a clean city. And we don't need all these other problems besides bears.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is report of General Manager Strategic Initiatives related to the street enhancement concepts for the Evergreen ALRT corridor. We have introductory comments by our General Manager Strategic Initiatives and a presentation by our Manager Evergreen Line Project.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of Council. Today's Evergreen Line presentation is the first of a number of reports that will be presented to Council on a regular basis over the next 4 years. Representatives from the province could not be with us here today. However, they are planning to provide an update to Council in about a month, outlining progress to date on the Evergreen Line from the provincial perspective. The Evergreen Line project is considered to be a legacy project, which presents Coquitlam with the opportunity to enhance the prosperity and livability of our community. And there are now exciting opportunities available to Coquitlam to assist in shaping both the functionality and livability of the 3 primary transportation corridors impacted by the ALRT line, those being the North Road, Clark Road, and Pine Tree Way corridors. Now, Mr. Ian Radnich, Coquitlam's Evergreen Project Manager, will present the street enhancement concepts for the 3 respective corridors. Ian.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Council. So the presentation today is, I'm going to take you through the corridor. I've borrowed some conceptual sketches from the provincial Evergreen Line website just to give a perspective on the corridor. And we're going to talk about how the city, as well as maybe other partners, might layer on some street enhancements along with the guideway construction and or after the guideway construction. So beyond the ALRT itself, there's an opportunity to shape the long-term multimodal public realm and other features of the corridors to support the adjoining land uses, to provide a public amenity and benefit, reducing inconvenience through possible opportunities, exploring opportunities for partnerships, and effective scheduling is one of the things that we're looking at, as well as cost-effective delivery of corridor enhancements. One of the things Council should be aware of is that TransLink undertook a pedestrian and cycling study, and they looked at the corridor and identified short and long-term objectives for the corridor. They're planning on doing some intersection improvements with the limited funding that they do have along North Road, and they've also identified short and long-term cycling routes, as well as multi-use pathway desire as a long-term goal adjoining the guideway. As Council's aware, though, however, TransLink has a lot of funding constraints at this time, and some of these things may, as funding gets resolved for TransLink, unfold in terms of funding later on in this process, hopefully prior to 2016 completion of the guideway. Just a sampling of some pictures of the existing corridors, just what they look like today. Some of the things that we're trying to avoid with the guideway construction in Coquitlam, just some of the negative impacts of some of the construction without any visual softening and aesthetic improvements. Here's the Canada Line in Richmond, some of the more attractive features that could be incorporated into a streetscape, wide pedestrian corridors, segments that are rain protected along the sideway. You can have the guideway sheltering you. Considering live wraps of some of the columns at feature locations, maybe at stations, for example. Low plantings under the guideway. You can't plant high trees under the guideway because they'll interfere with the structure, but trees in the adjoining area. Pedestrian scale lights, what the guideway typically does is it affects street lighting that used to light the roadway. It also used to light the pedestrian corridors, so sometimes you have to enhance the pedestrian lighting, as you see in this photo, so that you get the lighting of the pedestrian corridor as well. And it provides an opportunity to link to commercial and retail development along the corridor adjoining the sidewalk or multi-use pathway. So the focus, as Maurice pointed out today, is North Road, Clark Road, and Pine Tree Way. Starting with North Road, this is, as I say, it was a borrow from the Evergreen Line Project Office. It just illustrates the low heat station and then the guideway being constructed down the middle of North Road heading north. And then carrying on north, again, just a conceptual illustration of the guideway. In the distance there, you see it crossing over to the Coquitlam side from the median along North Road. Crosses over about Cottonwood. So layering on to the project work, the Evergreen project work on North Road, is we've been working with Burnaby to develop some concepts for the corridor. And this is an illustration of a possible concept for the median, kind of a daytime view. And then we're looking at collecting water from the guideway and draining it to the median area and then infiltrating that in terms of a drainage best management practice. And then there's an opportunity for nighttime lighting, feature lighting of the columns, for example. In Richmond, they've also done some lighting of the guideway. Just in terms of North Road, the fuller cross-section, not just the median, as well, what kind of opportunity do we have to do improvements in the boulevard area, the side of the street? There's a lot of residential development all along the corridor and some commercial retail. At this time, there's not a lot of space to provide any tree planting. You see those arrows from the top stories of the buildings. Those are kind of illustrative of people's views, and they're going to be looking out at the guideway. Long term, we'd like to create a separated sidewalk and provide some street trees and some additional lighting enhancements, but in the short term that's not going to be possible. It's only in longer term, as redevelopment occurs, that an opportunity will be provided to do that. The building setbacks are too close, as well as the property is not there to build those works at this time. So this is an opening day type graphic of the corridor on the Coquitlam side. And then maybe ultimately the longer term objective for North Road. Then moving on to the Clark Road area, this is Smith in the right-hand side of the corridor, and looking to the Coquitlam Plaza, and then continuing north along the guideway. This is a graphic that the province produced of the Coquitlam station. One important note is that the ultimate design will be up to the contractor that the province selects, but they have some guiding principles that the contractor must follow, like you see here, glazing, a lot of glazing, which is the glass, and then wood on underside of things, so where it's weather protected. So in terms of the Coquitlam station area, we've been working with TransLink in the province to see how we can minimize impact on local residents in terms of construction activity, as well as utilize all of the different parties coming together. So in this area, this is a complicated diagram, but the large arrows, the dashed arrows in the center of the graphic are just illustrating future linkages that are in our official community plan. In the gold on the right is the Boza Safeway development. We'll just zoom in on the Smith Avenue intersection. Here you see improvements that we've agreed with TransLink we're going to be advancing for the road. The blue are illustrative of left turn lanes that are going to be added, and some median works in this area. The purple cross-hatched area is an area that we hope to reach agreement with TransLink as we move forward, but there's no agreement today. Those are areas that we've identified would be great to, one, maybe achieve part of TransLink's multi-use pathway in this area, and then two, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic that leaves the station, and they leave in platoons, so the existing 2-meter sidewalk is not very adequate to handle that kind of volume. And then moving toward the north, this is the Coquitlam station. The green is illustrative of the provincial work. They're going to be building the station and the transit exchange and some median works in the area. Again, there's another one of those crosshatch purple zones that we hope to reach agreement with TransLink to do some further improvements, streetscape improvements in that area, like a separated sidewalk, but we haven't to date. And then moving this is a cross-section through the station as to what it might look like, and then moving to the Boza Safeway frontage. They're moving forward with their development, and they'll be doing frontage improvements to the Coquitlam design guideline standard as they advance. And then here again you see the blue left and right turn lanes. Those are proposed to proceed, and they were in engineering's capital plan for 2011 and 2012. Again, with TransLink's multi-use pathway concept, here this is looking, north is up on this diagram, and Como Lake and Clark Road. The dashed lines represent the proposed guideway. There's an opportunity where the province has bought all these lands to construct a multi-use pathway. So that's one opportunity that TransLink would like to achieve, and from a staff perspective, we're sort of supportive of achieving that in some manner, but there's no agreement to do that at this time. And then continuing north to the tunnel portal, that multi-use pathway can continue. From the tunnel portal, it goes into a tunnel, and it goes down to Port Moody. It goes through the Port Moody station, which is on this graphic just for continuity. And then you also see there's the Ioko station. Just for the audience, I guess, I've included a slide of the Ioko station as to how does that happen there. It's actually under the overpass there, so it's going to be a challenging one to build. And then moving again toward the east, towards the Coquitlam Central Station. This is the alignment along the north side of the railway. and moving to the West Coast Express station in Coquitlam. This is the West Coast Express Coquitlam Central, again, the province's graphic of it. And then looking north on the Pine Tree Corridor, you can see the alignment. There's Barnett Highway, Lougheed Highway, and the current transit exchange. You can see the guideways on the west side of the road, and then it crosses over the road to the east side of the road about Northern Avenue. So this is continuing along. This is at Northern Avenue where the guideway crosses to the east side of the road in front of the future city library. And here, this is the location that we're hoping to achieve, the Lincoln Station, just south of Northern Avenue. In the distance in this graphic, you can see the end of the line, which is the Douglas Station. This is the Douglas Station, the provincial graphic rendering of it. In terms of layering on streetscape improvements for the Pine Tree Way corridor, it's not a very pedestrian-friendly corridor this time. And so the staff team that sat down and took a look at the corridor was looking to try to maintain some of the important functions of the corridor, like to move traffic. It's a truck route. It's an important corridor for the city and moving vehicles. So we tried to apply some concepts to the corridor to try to enhance the pedestrian and cycling environment, as well as to protect some of those vehicle movement objectives. So then zooming in on the Guilford and Pine Tree Way intersection, what we've done here is you can see that gold is the existing, gold or yellow is the existing curbs and medians, and then overlaid is the suggested conceptual blue curb alignments. Some important things that are happening in this graphic is that we've eliminated a lot of the pork chop islands. We've retained one pork chop island, but we've changed on the northeast corner. But we've changed the angle of that so that it's not a free right. You have to kind of come to a yield and you have to wait. So cars are not moving as rapidly, and pedestrians can get better across there. At the station itself, on the northeast corner, you can see there's a lot larger area where you can stage pedestrians from that might be exiting the Douglas station to cross the crosswalk. You can also see that the pedestrian crossings are a lot shorter. But all of the lanes are maintained in terms of through lanes and left turn lanes, etc. The curb bulge that's introduced on the far side of intersections is something that provides an opportunity to introduce a parking lane along the corridor. Currently, the outside through lane is actually only a right turn lane, and only transit vehicles can carry down through that lane. So, can I point with this? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, so then in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that in shaded in light gray is the multi-use pathway that TransLink was hoping to achieve for the corridor. So we've proposed to align it with the guideway all the way along. So where it crosses Pine Tree Way, we've crossed the multi-use pathway as well. The lanes are maintained. There's tree planting opportunities. The lights along the corridor are getting old, and they're no longer made, the brown box-topped lights. So it's an opportunity to replace the street lights. And I talked about the shading that guideways create. So there's an opportunity to provide some pedestrian scale lighting as well. Also, just on the east side of the road here, which is the lower section under the guideway, there's an opportunity to look to see if that crosswalk can either be aligned with the guideway or potentially extended with some glass glazing to provide a sheltered protection for pedestrians going from south to north on the east side. Anyway, we have a bit more studying, modeling to do to confirm the concept here. but it's looking very positive from the consultants and staff review that's taken place in terms of developing this concept. We also need to talk to TransLink about those through lanes that are currently can be used by transit. They're a queue jumper, so those lanes we have to talk to TransLink about and Coast Mountain Bus Company relative to the impact on movement of pedestrian buses down the corridor. So this is more of a visually friendly rendering of this area, the same area, and the multi-use pathways in gray here. This just again points out the far side of curb bulges where there only buses could turn right or go through at these locations, and provides an opportunity beyond the curb bulges to provide time-limited parking and right turn lanes still. So this is a kind of a graphic rendering of opening day, what might it look like with the multi-use pathway, new street lights. Here's where it crosses over at Northern Avenue and the possible future Lincoln Station and the library, the multi-use pathway crossing over. And then here's down all the way to Barnett Highway, and showing the multi-use pathway and a necessity to reconfigure some of the parking in the Coquitlam Center Mall lot, and a need for some right-of-way from the Coquitlam Center Mall. In terms of the future, if and when, I guess, the Coquitlam Center Mall redevelops and there's additional density added to that site, in blue you see that future buildings could be accommodated behind the guideway, and there's a possibility of accommodating one-way frontage road and using that same angled parking that was created for opening day as a future parking area for the commercial retail units that might be along the frontage of a walking corridor there. This is what that might look like. Again, that same concept of one-way frontage road could occur just south of Guilford Way on the city's own property. We could accommodate a one-way frontage road in that segment as well if it's desirable to do so. And then with a one-way frontage road, this is kind of what it would look like. Just, again, an artist's rendering of that. So additional design elements not really touched on are things that we'd like to include in the corridor are wayfinding. We talked about the street lights, street furniture like benches, bike racks, waste receptacles, public art at feature locations, and look at drainage, opportunities for drainage infiltration as well. So subject to council support, we'd like to continue to refine the plan as presented today, continue to advance this through the different stakeholders, including property owners that might be affected, consider the different partnership opportunities and grant opportunities that might be available, and work with development applications that might either be in process or come forward so that these type of improvements could be accommodated on their frontage, similar to what we saw on the Boza frontage. And then also the transit-oriented development strategy has a proposal to do public open houses, and we think that that would be a great opportunity to maybe show the public some of the concepts that we're considering for the Evergreen Line corridor. And that's the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Council has, of course, taken some tours and has seen what exists in other communities, and I think Council unanimously wants, I believe, for us to really put the forethought into this one, to think outside the guideway, if you will, and make sure that we try to create a SkyTrain that we can truly celebrate, that brings all of the benefits to a community without some of the negatives. And so I appreciate all the work you've done so far, and I see a list of 5 councillors with questions. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd hope that the stations that you showed in Coquitlam are going to be built that way, because you showed one earlier, the one at Wellington and Lyde Highway in Burnaby. That's an ugly station. That is a terrible, terrible looking station. No two ways about it. Probably the ugliest one that we'll ever have or ever see. So I just wanted to, because I'll tell you, it's every time I drive by there, I just shake my head because it's not a pleasant thing to even look at. So I'd hope that the new modern station that you've shown is the ones that we're going to have.
Your Worship, that one was included to show what we didn't want to achieve. So, and yes, that is the intent. The province has given the guidelines to achieve something like what we saw today, is the glazing, with a lot of glazing.
Thank you very much.
No, when you design something as expensive as that one, you need to pretty much give it an architectural award in order to make it worthwhile. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. I like what you're doing. I like some, as Councillor Sikora said, I like some of the conceptual things with color glass. I think it's great. I have a question. I hope it's not going to be a dumb question, but I'm just dying to ask it, so I'll do it in public and be either embarrassed or excited. I don't know where I saw this in my travels, but Guildford and Pine Tree. It's not a huge intersection, although it's a large one with all the little pork chops, as you call them, going in there. Have there ever been any thought to, when you have the traffic lights, they all turn red at the same time so pedestrians can cross like which way they want, and then it's all traffic. And I don't know how dumb that would be, but it seems to me that would be, with everything happening at that intersection with the buses and the SkyTrain and perhaps Evergreen Theatre getting out and things like that, that would probably be the smartest place to ever do one. And I don't even know what you call them. Maybe Mr. Susak can help. Scramble. Okay. That makes sense. Like an egg. Okay. I'd just like to know if that would be something that we would do, because it would just seem to be a logical thing to do, being that those four corners are going to be very busy, maybe not in my lifetime, but in the next 20, 30 years. But I think maybe that would be the place for it.
Sure. Your Worship, that's a concept we can look at. We have looked at other shorter intersections, if you will, for that kind of a concept, but that's an idea that we can forward to our transportation planners and keep it in mind for the future, for the commissioning of this facility.
I just think when we come out, Your Worship, with our SkyTrain, because all the other cities have had the pluses and the minuses, I'd like to see the best ideas go forward first, and I'd like to see 6 RCMP officers at every station on opening day to show the little ones coming in with things they shouldn't be carrying the way back home. Thank you.
The little ones. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Reid about the best ideas. It's a real opportunity. And so a couple of concerns. If we're going to be building some more pork chops or changing them in any way, can we take a look about looking at their accessibility? I know that there's some where they're cut out so nobody has to go up and then down, but there's a refuge area that's lower down and the button is right there for anyone on wheels. It's a challenge.
Your Worship, that's certainly what we are doing, and it is top of mind. We are looking at what's being done in other areas, as well as the Accessibility Committee commissioned a report earlier on, and we're also utilizing that as information in terms of taking it forward. So, yeah, definitely, Your Worship.
Great. Thank you very much. I mean, given that it's a transit-oriented development, and I know that myself and the rest of council have been pushing for adaptable and accessible housing, that's where we're going to see people who need to lift their legs the least. So it would be great to keep that in mind for all of those, that accessibility around the stations. I didn't hear anything about Coquitlam Center, or Central. Is that what it's called? Coquitlam Central, which is where the West Coast Express is, in terms of how to move people from that side of the street over to this side, and what fabulous ideas you might have to help people cross 10 lanes of highway, because I think my concern is that that's getting ignored, and you know, We don't know about the Lincoln Station, that might be a real hub of activity, but I don't see anything that's really linking the south side and the north side in a way that makes it really good for pedestrians and cyclists.
Your Worship, yes, we are hopeful that if we can achieve the Lincoln Station, it will reduce the demand on having to cross at that intersection, because certainly today it's a very well-traveled pedestrian crossing, a challenging intersection to improve for pedestrians as well. We are looking at it with the traffic, the pork chop islands that are today, looking to make sure there's adequate storage on those. And that was some of our comments to the provincial Evergreen Line project when they were talking about if they impact those pork chop islands, what are they going to do to restore them? And we talked about having storage and sight lines, and so it's something that's top of mind, but it's not something that we have a lot of opportunities to reduce the laning on Lougheed or Barnett, the Barnett crossing there. And so, yeah.
Was there ever any conversation about a pedestrian overpass of some kind? It's just such a horrible crossing. Whether you're walking it or cycling it, it's just such a nightmare.
Your Worship, I'm not sure that perhaps that's been discussed, and it's something I can follow up with staff on as to previously Mr. Suzak may have some familiarity with that.
Sure. I'll make just one comment and then hand off to Jim McIntyre, who has some comments as well. I think structured crossings, personally, I think are a good idea, but they have to be coordinated with adjacent land use development, and I think that it's really going to be into the future when TransLink decides what it feels its vision is for that property. It still has to keep a park and ride facility operating. It still has to operate a transit station there, but they do have some development rights, and I think with future redevelopment on both sides, both opportunities for the Morgard development as well as the TransLink property, we would have our eye on the ball of safer, more effective ped crossings.
Your Worship, if I could, and Bill has touched on that, there has been discussions on occasion in the past, more with Morgard, and looking at the mid-longer term of the Coquitlam Centre property and building out to the south, and then at that time looking at the opportunity of building across and connecting with something on the TransLink property to the south. So it's there sort of in the longer term vision for that area, but as the mall property expands out to its perimeter, and then something happens on the TransLink property, that would be the opportunity then to have a safer, more direct pedestrian connection. And
we probably also don't know in terms of opening day exactly which station is going to get better utilized. If we have the Lincoln, it's like which one would people use in order to access certain parts of the north end, like the north side.
So, Your Worship, so it is something that certainly we could monitor out after opening day and work toward those objectives if there is the demand with future redevelopment.
Okay, so one last question, given that there's some real opportunity here, and I don't know if we have any sensors for bikes to influence the lights. And I know other communities like Richmond have done that, because there are times when I sit I'm at a censored crossing, and I clearly am not heavy enough to influence anything.
I'm not either.
Yeah. Apparently Terry isn't either. So is there an opportunity to, especially along Guildford, which is, I think, a major thoroughfare, and wherever else, as this comes up and we're building in these facilities, if there's opportunity to also include some sensing devices for cyclists?
Your Worship, that's certainly under consideration for the various corridors to look at how we can best accommodate cyclists. And there'll be probably various technology solutions that are applied in different locations. I know, for example, for North Road, because the corridor is not being upgraded substantially in the boulevard areas, there's limited opportunity, but what is going to happen with TransLink's assistance is to do directional letdowns as well as push buttons very in close proximity to be able to be accessed for both letdowns, so they're going to be strategically located. And then perhaps Guildford, which is a bike corridor or a cycling corridor. There's other technologies that can be applied where we are attracting cyclists to the corridor and making sure that the best technologies are applied.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I mean, it's some really exciting designs here, and I'm sort of really looking forward to when we start to see construction underway. And my concerns, as previous councillors have talked about, is along the Pine Tree corridor here. And a couple of things that strike me. First, looking down in front of Coquitlam Centre, where we've essentially lost what I would call the right turn lane into Coquitlam Centre. And we've put the far side traffic bulges in to prevent through traffic. But that's a really tight corridor in there now. We've got trucks going through there. We've got a median so that it keeps you on one side of the road. And I'm just wondering, this question is probably best directed at the fire chief, but that's a narrow corridor. That's our emergency, our main route for our fire trucks coming out of town center. And I'm just wondering, when we put those traffic bulges in and we potentially put parking in the right lane, fire trucks coming down there are now in a 2-lane road. They can't cross into oncoming traffic because of the medians going down. And I'm just wondering, are we planning to do something with lights, sinking, or what's the potential for creating a bottleneck for emergency vehicles going through there now that we're putting these bulges in and eliminating through traffic?
And Your Worship, just to clarify, the parking wouldn't be through that entire lane. We would maintain a right turn lane, so we wouldn't be eliminating the right turn lane. It's only the opportunity for parking is only in the first X number of meters, and we would make sure that we size the right turn lane to accommodate the right turn traffic that's anticipated. So it would provide in that right turn lane area an opportunity for emergency vehicles to pass. So
but I'm just worried that because we're now down to 2 through lanes essentially and no ability to cross into oncoming traffic to get through the jam, are we going to be doing something with the lights in there, or where the fire trucks route and use Guildford along and Johnson? But I'm just thinking that's going to be a pretty tight corridor with essentially 2 lanes through there.
Yeah, so it will be a left turn lane, 2 through lanes, and a right turn lane at the intersection as you enter an intersection, just for clarification.
Maybe ask the fire chief, because I know we have issues coming down Lougheed now in some areas there.
Chief Delmonico.
Now, Your Worship, that is a busy corridor for our trucks, there's no question. We do have Amtrak, which helps get us through the intersection by giving us the green light the majority of the time. So we can work with traffic division in trying to accommodate. I'm sure you know we're not big fans of speed bumps or any restrictions for our emergency vehicles, because it does reduce our response time. So I'll mark it down here, and we'll talk with the engineering division on that very issue.
Yep. Okay. Parking, looking at the plan in general, and I note that there aren't plans for additional parking for the SkyTrain. We have the West Coast Express, and I've raised this before, and it's probably not the last time, and possibly even the last time today I'm going to hear me talk about parking. But I am concerned about parking just generally in the area for, in particular, parking in close proximity to the stations for possible park and ride parking. The other comment that I would make is that Councillor Robinson mentioned the possibly pedestrian overpasses, and to me the one up at Douglas, that station really concerns me. It's on our 4 corners. It's the first or last stop on the line depending which direction you're going. And again, I'm worried about just how we're going to move traffic. We don't know what's going to be on the southeast corner, whether that's going to be a major draw for traffic coming, pedestrian traffic. You mentioned that that's not a pedestrian-friendly area even now. And I see with bringing that bulge out there that we're creating a place for people to stand, because I guess traffic will cross in major clusters depending as a train comes in. But I still can't help but think that there has to be a way that we can try to put a pedestrian overpass. And to me, that crossing from over Guildford by the what's now where the Evergreen Cultural Center is, to me, that's going to be a really key area to get pedestrians across. And I noticed that in the one picture of the station we didn't like, that, which I believe was the Willingdon one, it did have a walkway coming off the station. And I know we have some issues because the exit point is between the rails, so we have to come down to get underneath the rails. But I just noticed when I saw that picture, I thought, oh, well, they've got a sky bridge coming across, even though that's a middle platform. And I still can't help but think that there has to be a way that when they come off the station, just to keep them elevated until they can go that extra 100 meters and get across the street. And I'd really, whether we have to do some design or something with transit, really look at a way to keep pedestrians off ground level and in that particular intersection, because I think that will be an issue down the way. And I know there's some technical challenges there as well. And other than that, and the only other thing that sort of caught my attention was I noticed on one of the drawings there was some potential that down the road that Burlington right out here on the corner might become just a right in, right out, that we wouldn't be having traffic coming out onto Pine Tree anymore. Did I see that right on one of my drawings here?
Your Worship, I don't think so, but let me just have a look.
Burlington Drive, is that still remaining?
It is.
In and out?
Your Worship, on this plan, it is intended to be illustrated as the same movements as are today.
Is currently.
It's just we've introduced some curb bulges and reorientated the pedestrian crossing.
But would still be in and out.
Yep.
And is there any potential when we're doing alignments to put, I call them pickup lanes, so that when you come out, you're not crossing into waiting for the traffic on the what would be the far side, that you have sort of a safety lane where you can get over and then wait till you're clearing and then do an acceleration, rather than having to wait till traffic is clear in both directions before you pull out? Is there any potential or enough space there that we could put a couple spaces so when you make the left turn, you got sort of a safety spot to sit and then you accelerate when you have the brake?
So this is for left turns.
Left turns coming out here in front of City Hall, because you now have to wait. You've got 3 lanes. I guess we might be down to only 2 with the bulge, so I guess you can creep out a little bit more now with the bulge there. But I'm just wondering if this road is becoming busier, and generally when you narrow roads, you get more traffic on the 2 lanes. So I'm just wondering for spacing getting out, because I don't see a traffic light there, and if the answer is just to have a left turn pickup lane there.
Your Worship, that's something that we can look at at some of the more minor locations, perhaps like at Burlington. At some of the larger intersections that are signalized, they have a phase that allow that left turn to occur. So it's something we can
so it might
take
be a
look
natural
at.
break if you wait longer. Okay, that's great. I think the plans look pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you. Actually, quite a good report. I like the looks of the treatments that you're proposing moving forward. You're getting a lot of good thought into this before we get into it, so I appreciate all the hard work that you and staff have put into. My one comment goes back to the Guildford Pine Tree, the southwest corner with the bulge there. I don't like the idea of cutting out that right turn lane. I think you can achieve that pork chop with a curb into that lane, because the problem we do have now, when you come down through here, you're going to City Hall, you got people coming off. It would, with this bulge here, it'll smooth out and make the traffic a little bit better. But I'd like to see, because for transit, and being a transit, coming down here to this right, there is going to be some issues with service getting around that area and slowing down. I think even for traffic, you're going to have some backups on Guildford, the way people have to make the right around that bulge there because of the traffic flowing through the intersections. So I think I would like to see that part stay in there. As I say, the rest of the route, I think you've done a lot of good thought into this. I think there's some other refinements that can happen. And into that, I guess it's not so much on the right-of-ways, but a couple comments at the stations. Coquitlam Station, where the development happens, is going to be your most busiest station, because it's still going to be your main transit exchange for buses going to other parts of the area, and your West Coast Express and your now SkyTrain station being there. So it's going to be the main hub of the area. What I would like to see happen is, and I didn't see it in the plan clearly, is a walking awning or covering area from the SkyTrain station to the West Coast Express station. Because you have people traveling back and forth. It rains a lot. We've missed opportunities, I'd say, up at Lougheed Mall Station. We've got a big, huge guideway and hanging a large awning covering over the bus area. Because, for 8 months of the year at least, it rains here. So if we're looking at the station at Coquitlam, or the potential new Lincoln Station or others, to use within the guideways to have some large awnings covering that area, because once again, the comfort and use of transit, if you can make it more comfortable drive for people, it makes it more willingness to use the thing. The bus shelters are small, they don't protect a lot. So I think there's some ways of working with the project office to achieve these at a very better cost, create a more pleasant riding environment for our public. I'll say my experience on, I think the idea, and we talked about this before, about a pedestrian walkway across Barnett at Pine Tree, if it's not connected into a mall going into somewhere, pedestrian overpasses don't work that well. If you look down on Port Coquitlam at Shaughnessy, they put up a metal fence down there because people refused, and they would run across. Even people today go down to where the fence ends and runs across a highway. And a lot of people who are older or whatever don't like to go up across to come down. So I think if we can do treatments on the street to keep the crossings safe on the streets are where people really want to go and focus on that area. I think if we have in the future, I think as Mayor Stewart said, we talked with Moore Garden, if they can build out along the Barnett and we can build an overpass. I think the mayor said with it's just not overpass, they may have retail shops along it so people can get up, go through, and they're heading into the mall anyways, and it takes them directly into a shopping area. It'll have a great amount of use. But my experience has been, when I've seen them quite a bit, is people don't like to use pedestrian overpasses. They find it takes too long, it's more difficult. Thank you.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. To me, that park and ride at Pine Tree and certainly the Barnett Highway is a terrible waste of land. I mean, it's a lot of land used for park and ride, and I guess, you know, with me, I'd hoped that the mayor 3 years ago when he became the mayor would have chased that first-class hotel in there with a 5-story cement parking space in there with the SkyTrain station opening up into the lobby, and have also from the lobby of the hotel a walkway across to the town center, to the Coquitlam Center, footbridge over top would be an ideal. And would, you know, I mean, it would have solved all the parking problems. It would have solved with a first-class hotel in the town center and a few other things. But we're too late now, by the looks of it. But anyways, that's what I'd like to have seen, because right now it's a terrible waste of land.
Councillor Sikora, that's actually in the plans. There are several concept plans for the redevelopment of that site that include everything we've been working on for a number of years. There are some components of TransLink that are trying to figure out how to deal with the densities necessary in order to support the transit station. The last thing on earth we want is a bunch of pavement around a transit station. We want both jobs density and residential density around all of our stations, most certainly the Coquitlam Central Station. And so there are concept plans that include all of that. They've been made, actually I think they've been brought to council, but we'll bring them back. We'll make sure that the discussion around the redevelopment of that site includes council. Okay, Councillor Hodge again.
Yep, I just wanted to clarify because I agree with Councillor Asmundson. I think people don't want to go up and down, and they won't work. And we've seen places around the Tri-Cities where we put, pedestrian overpasses in, and then, in the worst case, you can have an accident right underneath them when pedestrians hit. And so I know that there's a couple of pedestrian overpasses in the city that haven't been used. But with SkyTrain, we have an opportunity because you come off the train up in the air, and a way to keep them in the air until they come down and have them come down on the other side of the road. And I think that's where you can work, because the Evergreen station or the Douglas station is relatively close to that intersection. To when they come off, just keep a bridge going till you get across the street and then come down, because you're right, if you come down, then they're not going to want to walk 100 feet and then go back up in the air and over and down. But if they come off the station and they stay in the air and walk 100 feet and then come down, then that will keep them up on the pedestrian overpass and not bring them down to the ground level. And I think that's what we have to look at, and possibly the same at the Lincoln station, and encourage, if we can do that, encourage stores to build with second-level entryways so that we can actually start to move some of our pedestrian traffic, both for traffic, but also people coming and going into these stores from the SkyTrain station, keep them up in the air and almost build in portions a second level above the street level so that we can keep our vehicle traffic down below and try and encourage more pedestrian access on the upper level, closer to the level of the SkyTrain.
Your Worship, just on the elevated crossings, I mean, that's our experience as well, is that people sometimes don't want to go to that extra effort to go ramped up and up and over, and so they're not as well used as we would like sometimes. Also, the concept of integrating into future development is something that Council has asked staff to do, and we're continuing to look for opportunities to do that. As also mentioned, I think that there is technical challenges with doing that, to linking directly into center platform stations, because they have guideway typically on either side of them. So you sometimes have to come in either from above them or come in from below, because you can't walk across the guideway. But anyway.
Good.
Thank you very much. You've actually provided some of the best photos I've seen of the prettiest photos of how ugly SkyTrain can sometimes be. And the ones that you showed were largely in Burnaby, actually, and not casting any aspersions. But what is it that I mean, how we started earlier? We started much earlier on the planning of trying to integrate SkyTrain in. Did Burnaby not, or does the Millennium Line, for some reason, the Millennium Line has so many mistakes along it that really incorporate things that are just they don't seem to be the kinds of things any community would want?
Your Worship, Coquitlam's taken the tact of trying to work with the project and to try to have shared interests, to achieve shared interests. And so I think that's going to take us a long way to trying to achieve some of these things.
Now, I've also got two pictures that I just gave to the Deputy City Clerk that, and these are both in Richmond. And I wonder, you showed a sketch of the nighttime version of something. Now, this is the daytime version of Canada Line right in front of, can't think of the shopping center. Doesn't matter. Lansdowne. And on Number 3 Road, we have some of those elements incorporated into what you've shown here.
Your Worship, those are details that we will have to continue to work through. We've kind of set a framework for what we want to achieve, and then some of these elements are what we're talking about incorporating. Making sure that we consider that it probably won't be all along the entire corridor that we can achieve wraps and things like this that are shown in this diagram. Those are about $10,000 a column, those wraps, and the actual operate of the line requires them to be removed every 5 years to be able to inspect the concrete. And so there's different challenges, but we do intend to include those kind of things, as well as the lighting and the waste receptacles and basically what you've put forward there.
Well, Council had the opportunity of seeing that during the day. The next slide is actually that one short section in front of the shopping center. The way I gather the shopping center must have contributed to that to some degree, or
And that's, Your Worship, that's an important element. That's one thing I briefly touched on, is looking to expand the public realm into private development and create an adjoining space, so that it has a greater benefit as a whole. So, absolutely.
Well, it certainly becomes an incredibly welcoming-looking street compared to some of the streets underneath SkyTrains across the Lower Mainland. Okay. Oh, Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate seeing these photos, because I was one of the council members that attended the tour of the various lines in the Lower Mainland, and certainly the Canada Line was the nicest in its design. There's absolutely no question about that, but I gather it's also a process of, you get better as you go along, which leads me to the question I'm going to ask is that, and I'm not familiar with what exists around the world, but are there other SkyTrain situations like this that we can look at in other parts of the world?
Your Worship, there's definitely other elevated guideways that we are looking for ideas from, and lots of other rapid transit lines that have, things like public art incorporated into them.
Yeah, and I appreciate you incorporating a lot of what we saw on the Canada Line in this design. So thank you very much.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you answering all those questions. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Rasmussen to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to the review of pavement rehabilitation funding. We have introductory comments by General Manager, Engineering and Public Works and a presentation from our Manager of Utility Programs.
Just by brief way of introduction, Your Worship, the last time the city had a comprehensive review of its pavement rehabilitation situation was about 10 years ago, and the council of the day really stepped up. It decided to initiate a 1% tax increase to try and protect those assets, and that has gone a long way. We are probably, among lower mainland cities in pretty good condition compared to a lot of other jurisdictions. The work that we're presenting to you is about trying to achieve what's called a least life cycle cost. If the council wants to go there, then what we're saying is there's probably a little ways to go, nowhere near what the pain was about 10 years ago. You can see the figures that are suggested. So we have a piece in front of you that is not asking for action at this time, but to initiate some discussion, to ask you to keep this issue in mind as you get into the financial planning sessions this year and into future years. And with that, if I could ask Dana to run through a very quick PowerPoint.
Thanks. Your Worship, members of council, the city has about 475 kilometers of road, pavement asset value of over $200 million. For pavement rehabilitation purposes, we've kind of classified roads into 3 categories. Major roads, which are arterial roads that serve a regional purpose. TransLink provides funding for operation and maintenance and rehabilitation of major road network. We also have community corridor road network, which is mainly the city's collector road network, and also the local road network, which provides local access to properties. One of the challenges we face with the pavement rehabilitation program is roads continue to degrade over time. For arterials and collector roads, the service life is probably as low as 15 years. The good news, as Bill mentioned, is the city has committed permanent sustainable funding for the pavement rehabilitation program. Back in 2003, Council of the Day approved an increase in the base budget of 1% per year for 5 years. That's resulted in about $3.8 million annually for a pavement rehabilitation program. This is just an example of Lougheed Highway, which is a road in good condition. Our challenge now, or our challenge with pavement management, is to try to keep roads like Lougheed in continuously good condition. I said earlier that pavements continually degrade over time. This chart actually is a schematic of the deterioration curve for a typical arterial collector road. The black line, which looks a little bit like a ski slope, shows that generally roads deteriorate fairly slowly for most of their service life. After about 12 years, the deterioration of a road is much more steep. That's mainly because of ongoing traffic on roads, cracks that allow water into the subbase, and further deterioration of the subbase. The blue dash lines shows maintenance costs. Generally, as the pavement ages, maintenance costs increase. And if we don't treat roads in a timely manner, those maintenance costs increase exponentially. Maintenance costs is mainly large patching or pothole repairs. You see the yellow portion of the chart, we call that the critical zone. That's a period of time where we want to actually start some treatment methods. That's a period of time where we can use low-cost treatments like crack sealing or pavement overlays to extend the life of the pavement. After about 12 years, you can't use asphalt overlays. You have to totally reconstruct the pavement structure. Generally what happens when you use an asphalt overlay, which the chart shows approximately $45 a square meters, is essentially you reset the deterioration curve of the asphalt. So essentially you've got a new pavement structure. I guess our approach to pavement management is to use low-cost treatment measures, and that way we can kind of maintain roads in the lowest life cycle cost. Just some examples of roads that are in poor condition. We consider these kind of a backlog of roads that have failed. This is Mariner Way, kind of between the service center and Dooney Trunk Road. You can see the alligated cracks in the curb lanes. There's also some rutting, probably due to poor drainage on the street. Another street in poor condition is Johnson Street between Barnett Highway and Guilford. Throughout the length of the road, you can see alligator cracking. So roads like this, we can't use crack sealing because there's just too many cracks, and we also can't do a overlay on top of the asphalt because those cracks will just reflect through the new asphalt overlay. United Boulevard between King Edward and about the Boulevard Casino is also in poor condition. Our consultant's done a bit of an analysis of our pavement management program to determine what the optimal funding is to maintain our road network at the lowest life cycle costs. For MRN roads, annual rehabilitation funding should be about $2 million per year. Our community corridor road network, it's about $2.75 million per year, and local roads about $3.5 million a year. When you compare that to our existing funding, you can see there's a bit of a funding need, a relatively small funding need for MRN of about $0.5 million, CCRN of about $0.7 million, and a little bit higher funding need for local roads of about $1.7 million per year. To kind of address some of these potential funding shortfalls, we suggest considering a small tax increase to the tax base of about 0.2 to 0.3% per year, up to a maximum of 1.2%. That kind of equates to about $1.2 million, and that will kind of make our MRN and CCRN pavement rehabilitation program fully funded to be able to use lowest life cycle cost measures. We could also use the infrastructure reserve to fund some of the roads that are considered a backlog of roads in poor condition to essentially catch up on the MRN and CCRN road network, and also possibly use casino funds to supplement the local road rehabilitation program. And finally, we realize there's a lot of competing needs for scarce public funds, but we feel that a modest increase in the pavement rehabilitation program will keep the city roads in good condition and allow us to maintain them at the lowest life cycle cost. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
If I could just add a few comments from an overall perspective, this is a very good example of a technical need that is brought forward by a department. And what we're trying to do now as an extended executive team is to put these kind of issues in context with other needs. And so I had asked the engineering department to work with Sheena to do that context. There's always a balance between having departments bring forward their needs, but when it does come to council, to give some perspective. So Sheena has provided some financial implications to this body of work, and both Dana and Bill have referred to that. And while there still are needs in the roads area, we would submit as an executive team that there's even greater needs in some other areas, because from our roads perspective, there is a very good base of funding. It is not sufficient to meet all the technical requirements upcoming, but there is a very good base, which many communities do not have. At the same time that council did that, and it is a real tribute to the council of the day who did that, there were plans to do something similar on the facility side, which we have not yet got to because of financial pressures. So I just thought we should highlight that, and so all the issues are before council at this time. We're not asking for any kind of approvals at this time, but this is one of the issues that council will have to struggle with come budget time.
Thank you. Well, this is a great example of how it's possible to save money in the short term, but sometimes the way to save money in the long term is to spend money in the short term, and I think this catch-up is something that may well be needed. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. Good report, Dana. As chair of the Engineering Utilities Committee, I brought this up to Mr. Suzak about where are we at, and Mr. Suzak at that time said, I'm already on top of that. We're starting to look at that. We are aware of where the budget is, because I give credit to that council that put in the 1 year, 5 years, and our councils that stuck with that to deal with this, because that has corrected a problem, 20 years of underfunding in the roads, and the cost involved in fixing that backlog. I think that 5 years equaled about $4.5 million back into the road budget. And even before he left, Mr. Wright also said when he presented this that he didn't know if it was going to be enough. It was a first step in trying to get at the problem that we had had. So I think we've been fortunate in 2008, maybe some people not, with the economy hitting. What we did gain out of that was greatly reduced costs, what we'd projected in roads, and we were able to do a bit more than we had projected. Now with the costs of oil going up again, our dollars are being stretched again on our project, and there are roads around here, and I'm glad, Dana, that Mariner and the other ones, Johnson, you've shown about deterioration. And I think that's a good thing, and to start moving on. We don't want to get into the position where we've made a great gain, we're getting at some good sustainability in our roads budget, where we start to slide back a bit and then face another problem where we have to play a bigger catch-up again. I think the modest increase in here to maintain that level is a good way of looking at it. This is going to go to budget, so we don't need to debate whether it'll be debated at budget whether we're going to step up to that or not. But I think we have a lot of areas. We do have the facilities that have an issue, as Mr. Stevlin pointed out, that we need to get at and look at and deal with that issue. But I guess the question comes back, we don't want to not achieve the goal that we started out in the first one on the road maintenance and fixing that problem on a road budget. And crack sealing can help. It may help for a couple of years, but it's not a long-term solution on your roads. It just buys you a little extra time. But I give credit to Dana, Mr. Suzak, and staff for a very good report on letting us know about this. And I think these are the type of reports that council needs to know about. Where are we at on these certain areas? What do we need to add? You may not get it all, but as long as we know, it gives us a good balanced understanding of the needs. Thank you.
And just to clarify, the LRN you've put city, that's the local roads. So that's our residential streets, the cul-de-sacs, the small streets. And I'm just thinking back to, I guess maybe 10 years ago, and maybe even before we did the 1% road tax, and it's going back to my days as I remember when I was on the traffic calming committee when we were looking at neighborhoods. And at that point in time, the city had a plan in place where they were doing road rehabilitation by neighborhood, that they would just go in and do like all of Ranch Park or all of Chirnsides, and there was a sort of a list and an order, and people knew that in 5 years my neighborhood's going to be done. And I'm not hearing any talk about that now. And I know when I was out in the election campaign, people were saying, oh, my road is awful. And so I don't know, are we just doing it now on a need basis, or is there still sort of, is it being done neighborhood by neighborhood? I'm just wondering where that plan got to and where we are with that.
Through your worship, yeah, absolutely. The program, it was actually kind of set out in 2003 and started funding set out in 2002 and started funding in 2003, was a neighborhood-based local road program. And in fact, we still follow generally neighborhoods. We kind of work within neighborhoods. One, because of the efficiency and mobilization and demobilization costs to do that, and one, we can kind of clean up a lot of streets at the same time and make people feel that there's a real improvement in the neighborhood. Having said that, we definitely do look at other streets kind of throughout the city where the needs are high. So we're not just focused on neighborhoods alone, although that's kind of the main focus of the local road program. We'll do other local streets throughout that are really deteriorating and really causing a lot of complaints from neighbors.
And as I recall at that time, that through local improvements, they were able to add curbs if they didn't have them, or sidewalks, but there was sort of a plan in place, and they could just get the road done, or at the same time they could have improvements made. And everybody sort of at that time, I think, knew when their neighborhood was coming up, and they could sort of plan for some of these extra add-ons, if you will. And does that still exist? Do we still have a sort of a plan that we can go and say, okay, this part of the city or these 10 streets are going to be done in 2014, and your neighborhood's 2015? Is there something that people can sort of see when their streets are coming up, or is it just based on, as we have funding, we move ahead?
Through your worship, generally the streets in the program, we notify the residents about a year before or so before the pavement actually occurs, and that gives them the opportunity to apply or petition for local improvement for curbs, street widening, and sidewalks. Generally, the uptake is fairly small on that just by the nature of our share of the funding costs between the neighbors and the city.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How much money is there in the budget for road sealing?
Through your worship, we fund kind of crack sealing. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, crack sealing.
He means crack sealing.
Yeah, we actually fund that out of our operating budget. I'm not exactly sure how much we spend kind of every year on it, but definitely, we kind of use the results of our paving program to see kind of which streets are best suited for crack sealing. But I couldn't tell you, but I could probably get back to you.
Your Worship, the crack sealing operating budget is, in my recollection, about 500 to 600K on an annual basis.
But for 2 or 3 years, I'm going to go back 6 years ago, you didn't do any sealing at all, practically none. Am I correct, Mr. Zuzek?
A number of years ago, I think, Your Worship, the city was not as diligent as it is these days in terms of executing its crack sealing program.
And now, would you put on the slide of Chilco? Now, see, there's a prime example.
We didn't show Chilco, but I think he means Mariner.
Yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Okay. This didn't happen overnight. All of a sudden, you did not see all these cracks open overnight. So if you had the sealing in place, road sealing, you'd be able to seal it and not have all these cracks. Now you wind up to where you probably could have saved this road for another 5-10 years if it was sealed. But because there was no money in the budget, you come up with this problem. And that's exactly what's happening in our city. And I've been harping at it for the last 4 or 5 years, that there's got to be some money for road sealing, because that'll preserve the roads for 5 or 10 years. Years ago, we had a lot of sealing done on the roads. Matter of fact, you go out to Mariner Way, you can see the sealing that's been done.
You can see it here in this photo.
And Mayor, do you mind if I have the floor, please?
It's in the photo, that's all. Go ahead.
If you want to speak, go ahead, I'll give you time. But anyways, now you're asking for $4 million in sealing, see? And I think that should be the first and foremost, because that includes labor, right? The $4 million?
The $4 a square meter is about the average cost of crack sealing, yes. Yeah. It includes labor completely installed.
And with the $4 million, how many employees would you add on, and how much of the sealing would you be able to do?
Just to be clear, that number was $4 per square meter. It wasn't $4 million.
Yeah, it's not $4 million. I think Bill says we spend about $500,000 annually on crack sealing.
Yeah, ballpark 5 to 600K annual is the crack sealing budget. There are other maintenance technical remedies as well, but for crack sealing only, I think it's in the 500 or so range.
See, because, I remember calling in the last few years catch basins that are starting to sink and little cracks on the side of them. If you don't attend to them, what happens? The whole road goes. There's no question about it. So you got to do preventive maintenance on the roads, otherwise you're faced with a situation as we're faced today, that no end the money will help unless you do some preventing, okay, in a big way. I remember years ago when Neil Nyberg was engineering here, he wanted $65 million to bring up the roads to first-class condition, and that's 20 years ago, see? And then I said, well, how much a year? He says $5 million a year would have done the job. That's 20 years ago, and now probably that $5 million is probably almost double. At least another about $5 million on top of it. So these are the things that do happen, and I would suggest that we use the casino money to bring this fund up to scratch, to make sure that the roads are being maintained, because I'll tell you right now, we're not catching up with it. We're losing. We're losing the battle. Today, as we sit here today, we're losing the battle. There's more and more roads looking like this. And never mind the side streets, the main streets are looking like this. And so we're never going to catch up. The most important to me is, there's many catch basins. If you go down Mariner, almost every catch basin is sinking. And little cracks appearing, small cracks. If they were sealed, they'd probably save it for 5-10 years. But it's not being done. And I'm certainly not blaming anybody in the engineering department. You guys have done a tremendous job. The fact is, it's not in a budget. You can't go spending money that you haven't got. So those are things should be happening. I know years ago we had a tremendous amount of ditches that had to be filled in. Something like $45 million worth of ditches had to be filled in. And there was money in the budget to fill in the ditches. And I said, well, once the ditches are filled in, then that money will revert to roads. I went to Ottawa. I don't know what happened to the money, but it never went into roads. It just disappeared. All of a sudden, we are dipping into the casino funds to do the roads. Now, I'd like to. There's nothing wrong with us saying, okay, in a year or so, all the money from the casino will go to road repair, the sealing and maintenance on roads. I don't mind. I'd support that. Thank you very much.
Okay, on this photo, I just want to clarify, there has been some sealing done. What the damage that we see in the road, in the truck track, I guess the ruts, buses, probably the buses that did it. How does that get there? And was that preventable by improved sealing?
Sure. Your Worship, Coquitlam has some very unique topography in comparison to a lot of other lower mainland municipalities. We deal with an extraordinary amount of groundwater, which is probably the single most important, significant attacker, if you will, of a pavement structure. Groundwater can soften, weaken the underlying substructure, and that's often a result. And that often results ultimately in raveled pavements or depressions in the wheel tracks. Crack sealing is, like I say, but one kind of strategy to minimize that. And we've had internal discussions in the department about taking a look at that particular budget and seeing what can be done to shift resources around from an operating budget perspective to provide a few more resources there. But the real issue for us is the rehab budgets, which tend to be more capital-based. And what we're emphasizing here is the rehabilitation aspect of those pavements. That's where we feel is the most important area for consideration for any future funding. Don't want to continue on too long, but I just want to emphasize the way we thought this through as a staff team in terms of presenting it to you. If there is to be a potential tax levy for increased road rehabilitation, we would tend to prioritize that certainty, if you will, of revenue into the most important road classes. We would want to be sure that kind of funding hits the MRN, the CCRN, the arterials, major collectors, and whatnot. For the past several years, the city has decided to, let's call it, save the casino fund monies that used to go into road rehab for our future commitments for the city side of the Evergreen project. All of the improvements that you just saw in the previous presentation about Evergreen, a lot of that is going to be funded through our saving up monies. We fully agree with that, but what we think should happen is once we have paid for our share of the Evergreen improvements, all these streetscape improvements, that casino fund money that should come back into road rehab, and we would tend to think of using those funds for the local road program. So hope that helps.
No, thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Good report. I often remember all the engineers, your predecessors. Every time I said a local road was terrible, they said, well, too bad we do the important ones first, and the local roads wait till the end. So now we're at a place where I can see that if we had casino funding right now today, I would put money into it in order, just as you've said, to catch up to the other roads. And then we're going to have to start getting taxes every year to cover all these roads, because but we need to play catch up on the local roads, and that really concerns me. And I would hope at budget time we can be looking at some of the casino funds and seeing if we can't put them into the local roads to bring them up. And from there on in, I don't think this is something that should be funded out of capital dollars once we've caught up. I think then we should be just funding it out of tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to ask for any answers because contrary to what I said earlier, I do appreciate the need to move this meeting on and get into the closed meeting. But I'll tell you a couple of things that I'm going to want to talk about when we come to talking about funding. One is I want to appreciate better the decisions that were made some 10 years ago when I wasn't here. I've heard a lot about them. I've heard how wise they were, and my appreciation then was that they would prevent us from being in the position that's now described to us. I suspect that they were targeting achieving a level of maintenance that is somewhat less than the lowest life cycle cost that's described. But that's one of the questions that I'll ask come that day. The other one is, though, that one of the significant factors here is major road network. It's funded by TransLink to the tune of 1.5. 2 is the right number. If this is a wise decision for us to take to move to lowest life cycle funding, surely that's a good decision for TransLink as well, and I hope we'll be making that case to them sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much for this. I'm going to ask what some may think is a dumb question, but I'm not all that familiar with the quality of our roads. So my question is this: is there one quality standard that we use for pavement?
Through your worship, there's kind of several kind of parameters we use to rate the condition of a road. There's a general index.
Sorry, let me clarify that. I'm not referring to the condition of a road. I'm referring to the pavement that we actually put in. Is there one quality standard?
New pavement.
New pavement.
New pavement.
I understand what you're saying.
So that's going to affect the life cycle costs. Like if there's more than, if there's a high, medium, and low standard, if we're using a real high, we may get a greater life cycle. If we're using something very low, then a lower life cycle. So that's my question to you.
I'll try to answer first and let kind of Bill follow through. Generally, kind of each pavement rehabilitation project is evaluated based on the site conditions. For heavy arterial roads or collector roads, they may use what's called a super pave, which is a pavement asphalt mixture that's more resistant to rutting. Local streets probably doesn't warrant it, so they have a different asphalt mix design.
Your Worship, Coquitlam follows, by and large, the master municipal construction specifications that are consistent throughout the Lower Mainland. We are actually, though, more rigorous than that standard document for our arterial roadways because of the kinds of traffic that our arterial roadways come up against. And we've actually, I think at one time, suffered a bit of criticism because of that. But just so you know, for Coquitlam's arterial roadways, we insist and specify a higher proportion of fractured rock in the mix. It creates a much stronger, more durable pavement. Okay. The MMCD actually allows you to get away with less than that if you wish on arterial pavements, but that would tend to certainly decrease the service life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fractured rock. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I was hoping to, throughout the course of the discussion we're having and the reports, to try to fully understand something very basic here, and it's the, and I still don't think I quite grasp it, it's the definition of lowest life cycle cost. Does the lowest describe the word cost, or is it describing the life cycle?
Through your worship, it's the lowest cost to operate and maintain and rehabilitate the road throughout its life. So throughout its kind of entire life cycle. Say if you assume roads just take a arbitrary duration of 50 years. You want to have strategies, operation, maintenance, and rehabilitation that gives you the lowest kind of net present value for all those activities you do over the next 50 years on the road. And generally that means repeated, frequent kind of asphalt overlays rather than allow a pavement to fully deteriorate where the costs are substantially higher and you're allowing actually the road to become a very poor drivable condition.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Now, on that issue of the life cycle then of a typical road, you had a graphic up earlier with the one declining line, another one going up in the sweet spot there in the yellow. Now this would be a graphic for a heavily used road, would it be? 7 to 12 years? Is that, or is this just, or a medium or neighborhood?
That's correct. This would be kind of typical for an arterial collector road.
Arterial collector. So a little neighborhood road like where I live on Steeple Drive, it would, the graph would be quite a bit, the declining line would be quite a bit longer than 30, 40 years?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a lot kind of lighter vehicles and a lot less vehicle traffic on local roads.
And then that leads to exactly my last question, which is the heavy vehicles. There was a little side discussion over here about the damage that buses and heavy trucks cause. And on the issue of buses, does the city get any special relief or contribution from TransLink for the use of our roads and the damage that they do to our roads with the heavy buses?
Is there a short answer, a two-letter answer?
Through your worship, it's no. There's no special funds.
Is that something that, it sounds like it's something we've talked about in the past. Is it something worth bringing up again that...
I think it would certainly make the decision-making about cutting the routes easier.
Yeah, there is some funding provided for some of the major road network. It's not adequate, but there is some funding provided through TransLink, which happened when TransLink was formed. It seems to be one of the issues that are on the chopping block when TransLink runs out of money, so they reduce that fund somewhat. They have increased it back to its theoretical allowance original, which is still not adequate, but it again is under threat going forward because of the shortage of funding. Bill has a better handle on the details of that. I don't know if you wanted to provide any further commenting.
Well, just at a high level, Your Worship, the more money TransLink is able to give its member municipalities for operating, maintaining, and rehabbing the major road network, clearly the more money any individual municipality will have left over in order to devote that toward the local road network. So we're always happy if TransLink can find a way to up their funding for the MRN.
But are we linking that request from our end specifically to the damage that is done to our roads by the buses?
The MRN inventory carries major truck traffic, although I'm not aware that there is a specific category or allowance for buses only. But the dollars per lane kilometer that TransLink gives its member municipalities is based on heavy truck traffic roadways. I would assume a bus would probably qualify similarly.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of the questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Su. Motion to receive first.
Motion to receive. Second.
Councillor Asmussen, Councillor Nicholson to receive. All in favor. Opposed. Carried unanimously. Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson to adjourn. All in favor. Opposed. Carried unanimously. We'll convene in 10